You really think I am useless? Vanessa's words cut across the quiet dining room, wine sloshing from her glass as she gestured toward him with a mocking grin. Caleb Turner sat silently, steady, his white shirt slightly damp from the splash, eyes scanning her movements, not for anger but for understanding, a calm that contrasted sharply with her theatrics, the faint clink of silverware echoing against the wood paneling around them, while the glow of the chandelier highlighted every crease of tension in her posture, and the air smelled faintly of oak and spilled red, marking the start of a day Caleb had anticipated with careful patience, remembering every time she had dismissed his efforts in the old family garage, the late nights repairing engines, balancing accounts, and maintaining the tiny fleet of delivery trucks that had once seemed to him like his whole world. Now realizing the value hidden in those dusty ledgers, invoices, and contracts long overlooked, knowing that beneath the mockery and loud laughter lay the very proof of authority and ownership he had quietly accumulated over years, his hand brushing over a folder containing financial documents, the paper crisp and orderly, evidence that the company she celebrated belonged to him, every transaction, every signature, every page a silent testament to his diligence, while Vanessa continued to lecture him on what she assumed was his incompetence, oblivious to the fact that the $600 million deal she was praising had been signed under his control all along, the irony striking like a bolt of lightning that no one else in the room could perceive. And as Caleb slowly stood, adjusting his tie, he felt the weight of patience and preparation settle into the posture of a man who had known the truth long before the scene unfolded, the glow from the chandelier reflecting off polished floors as he walked past the table, his eyes never leaving hers, observing the flicker of uncertainty that passed across her face for the first time, the once confident grin fading slightly, revealing the cracks in her carefully constructed arrogance. Every step he took measured, deliberate, a rhythm built over countless hours of silent work and observation. And he carried with him not only the folder and its contents, but the quiet authority of someone who had turned every insult, every laugh at his expense, into motivation, strategy, and preparation, knowing that the reveal to come would be precise, undeniable, and complete. And as he opened the door to the office where the corporate documents waited, Caleb inhaled deeply, the scent of polished wood, paper, and faint coffee blending into a calm awareness that every move from here on would be dictated not by emotion, but by calculated action, the wine stain drying unnoticed on his shirt, a small reminder of how close the world had come to underestimating him, and yet how far he had prepared to ensure that when the moment arrived, every witness, every document, and every gesture would align perfectly to show that the man they thought useless was, in fact, the owner, the decision-maker, and the quietly powerful force behind every contract and every celebration that Vanessa had so arrogantly assumed she controlled, and in that controlled, silent motion. Caleb felt the weight of anticipation and quiet satisfaction settle as he sat at the desk, opened the first folder, and began methodically reviewing every page, knowing that within these documents lay not only proof of ownership, but the start of a lesson that would unfold calmly, professionally, and with the precision of someone who had spent years turning patience into power, setting the stage for the revelation that would leave no question about who truly held the authority and the truth behind the $600 million deal. Every heartbeat synchronized with the deliberate movements of his hands as he organized, cross-referenced, and prepared to unveil the carefully documented reality, while Vanessa waited, unaware of the quiet storm that had been building for years. Oblivious that the man she had mocked was the very foundation of the empire she celebrated, and the tension in the room thickened as Caleb leaned back slightly, closed his eyes for a brief moment to center himself, and prepared to step forward into a day that would redefine everything she thought she knew about control, success, and the measure of true capability. The office behind the dining room had always been the one place Vanessa refused to enter unless she needed to complain about dust. She called it Caleb's little cave, the room where dreams went to die under stacks of receipts and old repair manuals. That night, with the wine stain drying against my shirt and her laughter still clinging to the walls, I closed the door behind me and let the quiet take its proper shape. My name is Caleb Turner, 41 years old, raised outside Charlotte, North Carolina. in a house where money was never loud and work was never decorative. My father ran a small logistics repair yard off Highway 74, the kind of place people drove past without noticing unless their truck broke down. To Vanessa, that yard had always been proof that I lacked ambition. To me, it was the first place I learned that engines, people, and businesses all fail the same way. Slowly, quietly, one neglected part at a time. I sat at the oak desk, opened the top drawer, and took out the black binder she had never bothered to ask about. Turner Industrial Holdings. The name was plain. Boring, even. That was the point. Flashy names attract people who like shine more than structure. Inside were ownership agreements, acquisition records, board authorizations, and private equity documents tracing a path Vanessa had never cared enough to follow. The company she was celebrating that evening, Meridian West Development, had not chosen her firm because of charm, connections, or luck. It had chosen her firm because I approved the final partnership through the parent company that owned controlling interest in Meridian's expansion fund. $600 million. That number sounded impossible until you understood the math behind it. Warehouses, cold storage, regional shipping hubs, medical supply routes, land options bought when everyone else thought the area was too far from the interstate to matter. I had built it piece by piece while Vanessa told her friends I was playing mechanic with old trucks. Not because I wanted to deceive her, because every time I tried to explain, her eyes glazed over before the second sentence. She did not want to know what I was building. She wanted something she could show off immediately. A skyline office, a luxury car, a husband whose success photographed well. Mine did not. Mine smelled like diesel, steel, concrete dust, and cheap coffee at 5 in the morning. I turned to the first contract and saw my signature at the bottom, clean and steady. The same hand she had called useless 15 minutes earlier. A strange thing happens when someone insults you after you already know the truth. The words still hurt, but they lose authority. They become noise outside a locked door. I heard Vanessa laughing again in the dining room, talking on the phone now, probably telling someone how I had just walked away like always. She mistook restraint for surrender. Most people do. My phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Richard Hale, Meridian's chief counsel. Board confirmation tomorrow at 10 a.m. All parties attending. Final release requires your verbal approval. I read it twice, then placed the phone face down. Tomorrow. That was when Vanessa expected to walk into a glass conference room as the brilliant wife who had secured the biggest deal of her career. She expected partners to applaud, cameras to flash, and executives to treat her like the future. She did not expect me. Not in the chair at the head of the table. Not with Richard Hale beside me. Not with the authority to pause, approve, or restructure the agreement she had already bragged about like it belonged to her. I opened a second folder and reviewed the disclosure schedule. Vanessa's firm had included her as lead negotiator but failed to disclose a material personal conflict. Her public humiliation of the controlling owner at a private dinner attended by 2 junior associates who had already emailed apologies to my office. That mattered. Not because of hurt feelings. Because trust is a business asset, and leadership behavior is part of risk. No shouting. No revenge speech. Just governance. The kind of word Vanessa used to skip over because it did not sparkle. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the family photo on the bookshelf from 7 years earlier. Vanessa in a blue dress, smiling beside me at the ribbon cutting for my first warehouse. Back then, she still called me patient like it was a compliment. Somewhere along the way, patience became boring. Quiet became weak. Modest became poor. And poor became permission to disrespect me. I took the photo down, not angrily, just carefully, and placed it inside the drawer. Then I removed my stained shirt, folded it over the back of the chair, and put on a clean white one from the closet. Tomorrow, the room would be full of people who knew numbers, contracts, titles, and signatures. Vanessa had spent years judging fabric. Tomorrow, she would meet the structure underneath. The next morning, Charlotte looked clean after the rain. All wet pavement, glass towers, and sunlight breaking through low gray clouds like the city had dressed itself for business. Vanessa left the house before me, wearing a cream blazer, gold earrings, and the smile of someone already rehearsing applause. She did not mention the wine. She did not apologize. She only glanced at my clean shirt, my dark jacket, and said, "Try not to embarrass me today if you decide to show up." Then she kissed the air near my cheek and walked out with her leather portfolio, tucked under one arm. I stood in the entryway and listened to her heels cross the porch, each click smaller than she believed. By 9:20, I was in the back seat of a black town car, reading the final briefing from Richard Hale. Meridian West Development. Turner Industrial Holdings. Control Authorization. Conflict Review. Final Release Authority. For phrases. For keys. I did not feel powerful in the way people imagine power. No rush. No heat. No need to prove anything to the driver, the city, or the woman who had spent years calling me useful only when something broke. I felt steady. That was better. Steady survives rooms where pride burns out. The Meridian Conference Suite sat on the 35th floor of a building downtown, with windows wide enough to make the skyline feel like a painting owned by people who never got oil under their nails. When I stepped out of the elevator, the receptionist looked up, checked her screen, and stood immediately. "Mr. Turner, they are expecting you." Not Caleb. Not guest. Mr. Turner. It still struck me, that difference in sound. At home, my name had become a complaint. Here, it opened doors. Richard Hale met me near the boardroom entrance, silver-haired, precise, carrying a tablet and the calm expression of a man who had spent 30 years watching expensive mistakes arrive, wearing confidence. We reviewed the order one last time. Vanessa's firm would present first. Her team would celebrate the close. Then Richard would request final governance confirmation. Then I would speak. Simple, clean, unavoidable. Through the frosted glass, I could hear voices. Vanessa's laugh rose above the others, polished and bright. The laugh she used when rooms were useful. I recognized two partners from her firm, a junior associate named Claire and Nathan Briggs, the managing director who had spent months praising Vanessa's strategic brilliance, without knowing who approved the path under his feet. I waited outside the door for 30 seconds longer than necessary, not to make an entrance, but to feel the line between before and after. A man only gets a few moments like that. Moments where silence still belongs to him before truth becomes public property. Then Richard opened the door. The room turned. Vanessa saw Richard first and smiled wider. Then she saw me behind him. Her smile did not vanish all at once. It staggered. First the eyes, then the mouth, then the color under her makeup. Nathan Briggs frowned like he was trying to place me from a photograph. Claire looked down at her tablet too quickly. She knew. Or at least she suspected after the apology email she had sent at 11:48 the night before. Vanessa recovered fast, because pride is a good actor when panic is still backstage. "Caleb," she said, with a laugh light enough to float. I did not realize spouses were invited to final review. A few people chuckled, uncertain. I walked to the empty chair at the far end of the table, the one with no nameplate, because the people who matter most in a room sometimes do not need one. Richard remained standing beside me and said, "Mrs. Turner, Mr. Turner is not here as a spouse." The room went still. Not silent exactly. Still. Air in a held breath. Vanessa's fingers tightened around her pen. Richard continued, "Mr. Turner is the controlling owner of Turner Industrial Holdings, the parent entity with final release authority over Meridian West's expansion partnership. He is here to approve or withhold final confirmation." No one moved. $600 million sat in the center of that table in binders, projections, and signatures. Vanessa looked at me like I had spoken a language she suddenly realized had always been written on the walls. I rested my hands on the table. Calm, clean shirt, steady voice. "Good morning," I said. "Let us review the risk disclosures." The boardroom was still, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off polished tables and glass nameplates, casting patterns that made the papers look like mosaics. Vanessa Turner sat at her designated seat, her smile slightly strained, fingers drumming lightly against the leather-bound notebook she had brought, pretending control while her eyes darted toward the chair at the head of the table where I, Caleb Turner, had just settled, the quiet authority in my posture. Heavier than any words spoken, the weight of ownership palpable in the subtle shift of air around us. And I began with a methodical review of risk disclosures, one by one, watching her reaction as the room hung on the edge of understanding. Every executive present suddenly aware that the person they assumed to be absent or irrelevant was in fact the controlling owner of the parent company, responsible for approving or rejecting every aspect of the $600 million deal. Vanessa's firm now facing the reality that her public performance of confidence had no bearing on the authority that I held. And as I continued through each point, highlighting details about financial liability, corporate governance, and conflict disclosures, I noticed the small changes in her posture, the tightening around her shoulders, the way her pen paused midair, her eyes flicking toward the exits before returning to the documents as she tried to maintain a semblance of composure, yet unable to hide the realization that the power she had assumed was hers by association was actually mine. Every contract, signature, and decision point under my name, prepared months in advance to ensure clarity, enforce accountability, and demonstrate the consequences of presumption, and the executives who had previously nodded along with Vanessa now sat attentively, the murmurs fading into silence as they absorbed the truth, a controlled, professional tension filling the room as I methodically proceeded to the final approval points, confirming each clause, signing my name where necessary, and observing Vanessa's internal recalibration as she understood that the $600 million agreement she had celebrated was validated, controlled, and sanctioned entirely by me, Caleb Turner, not by luck or charm, and with each signature and confirmation. The room's atmosphere shifted from light-hearted anticipation to serious acknowledgement of authority as colleagues adjusted their understanding of hierarchy and influence, and Vanessa, realizing the magnitude of oversight she had never accounted for, took a slow, measured breath, her shoulders lowering slightly, eyes focusing on the table as she mentally recalibrated her position within the scenario. The weight of years of misjudgment settling quietly, and I remained steady, calm, and deliberate, guiding the meeting to completion with precise attention to detail, ensuring every legal, financial, and procedural point was acknowledged, reinforcing the lesson that respect, preparation, and patience ultimately determine influence. Leaving Vanessa to navigate the new reality of a room where control and power had been silently in my hands all along. The meeting did not end with applause. It ended with pens being capped, folders being closed, and people looking at Vanessa in a way she was not used to being seen. Not as the brilliant closer. Not as the woman who had supposedly carried the deal across the finish line by force of charm and ambition. They looked at her like a risk factor. That was worse than anger. Anger still gives a person importance. Risk gets managed. Richard Hale stood beside the display screen and summarized the next procedural step with the calm precision of a surgeon reading lab results. Meridian West's final release would be paused for 72 hours pending a formal review of conduct, disclosure, and partner confidence. The agreement was not canceled. It was not destroyed. That would have been reckless, and reckless was never my style. It was paused. Legally. Cleanly. Professionally. A quiet door closing until the room learned how to tell the truth. Vanessa's managing director, Nathan Briggs, shifted in his chair and asked whether the review would affect the public announcement scheduled for Friday. Richard glanced at me. I did not rush. I looked down at the approval packet, then at the long table where every person seemed to be holding their breath in a tailored suit. Public announcements should follow governance, not outrun it, I said. 6 words. Enough. Nathan nodded like he had been the one thinking that all along. Vanessa's face tightened, but she kept her voice smooth. Caleb, surely this is not necessary. We had a private disagreement. I looked at her then. Really looked. The cream blazer. The gold earrings. The same woman who had poured wine on my shirt the night before and called me useless in a room where junior associates sat close enough to hear every syllable. Private, I said, is not the same as irrelevant. Her pen stopped moving. Richard opened the incident summary without naming it something dramatic. No scandal language. No emotional framing. Just witness statements, apology emails, and a note that 2 associates had raised concerns about professional judgment after the dinner. Claire, the junior associate, stared down at her tablet, cheeks pink, not from shame, but from the awful relief of seeing truth documented without being made cruel. Vanessa turned toward her, and Claire did not look up. That small refusal hit harder than a speech. People who depend on approval learn quickly when the room has changed temperature. Richard continued, explaining that leadership behavior connected to a major partnership could affect trust between firms, especially when the controlling owner had been personally disparaged by the lead negotiator. Vanessa inhaled sharply. Disparaged sounded so civilized. So clean. It made the ugliness wear a tie. Nathan Briggs asked for a brief caucus with his team. I agreed. The room emptied slowly, leaving me by the window with Richard. 35 floors below, Charlotte traffic moved along Tryon Street, tiny and orderly, as if every car knew its lane better than some people knew their vows. Richard said, "You handled that well." I watched my reflection in the glass. Clean shirt, calm face, tired eyes. I did not handle it well, I said. I handled it late. He did not answer, which meant he understood. That is the part people miss about restraint. It does not mean nothing hurts. It means hurt does not get to drive. 10 minutes later, Vanessa came back alone. Not with Nathan. Not with Claire. Not with the two partners who had spent the morning orbiting her confidence. Alone. She closed the boardroom door softly behind her and stood near the end of the table. For the first time in years, she looked at me without performance. "Caleb," she said, "why did you never tell me it was you?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the question people ask when the consequences arrive before humility does. I did try, Vanessa. In small ways. Over dinner. In the car. At home. You told me logistics bored you. You told me trucks were not real business. You told me I should be grateful you made us look respectable. Her eyes lowered. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The memory did the work. She stepped closer and whispered that she had been under pressure, that the deal meant everything, that she had lost sight of herself. Maybe that was true. Maybe pressure reveals character the way heat reveals cracks in glass. I pointed to the folder in front of her. The review is not personal revenge. It is business. You taught me that appearance matters. I learned structure matters more. Her mouth opened, then closed. No comeback. No insult. No polish line. Just silence. And behind it, the sound of an empire rearranging itself around facts she had never bothered to respect. When the others returned, Vanessa sat smaller in her chair. The meeting resumed. Richard set the timeline. Compliance review. Partner confidence assessment. Revised disclosure memo. No announcement until approval. The $600 million deal was still alive, but no longer in her hands. It sat where it had always sat, beneath my signature, under my authority, waiting for honesty before motion. And as I signed the temporary pause order, I felt no triumph. Only the cold, steady truth that sometimes the most powerful word a man can say is not yes. It is wait. The 72-hour pause changed everything faster than any shouting could have. By noon, Vanessa's firm had removed the announcement banner from its website. By 2, the champagne reception was postponed. By 5, Nathan Briggs had sent a carefully worded email to the executive team saying all public communication would wait until governance review was complete. Governance review. 2 words clean enough for a press release and sharp enough to cut through pride. Vanessa did not come home that evening until after 9. I was in the office, reading the revised disclosure memo, when I heard her keys in the front door. No heels clicking with purpose. No phone call voice floating ahead of her. Just the soft sound of someone entering a house where the balance had shifted. She paused outside the office, but did not knock. For years, she had treated that room like an extension of my smallness, a place full of boring papers and old habits. Now she stood outside it like it had a lock she had only just noticed. I said, "You can come in." The door opened slowly. She had changed out of the cream blazer, but the confidence had not come back with the casual clothes. Her eyes moved over the binders, the labeled folders, the framed land survey near the bookshelf, the old photograph of my father standing beside a line of delivery trucks in 1996. That picture used to embarrass her. She once asked me why I kept a photo that made us look blue-collar. I told her because it was true. She had rolled her eyes and walked away. Now she looked at it like it contained a language she had never learned. I expected anger. I expected excuses. What I got was quieter. How much of this was real before we married? She asked. I leaned back in the chair. Enough. The yard. The land options. The first warehouse interest. The rest came after, but not suddenly. Not magically. It came from work you called a distraction. She swallowed. I was not trying to humiliate you last night. That was almost worse than a lie, because she probably believed it. People like Vanessa often think cruelty requires planning. It does not. Sometimes cruelty is just what leaks out when respect is gone. I closed the memo and folded my hands on top of it. You poured wine on me in front of your associates and called me useless. What word would you use? Her face tightened. She looked toward the floor. For a moment, the room held the sound of the air conditioner and distant traffic beyond the windows. Then she said Brandon had filled her head with certain ideas. Brandon. There it was. The name she had not used all day. He was not at the board meeting, but he had been at enough dinners, enough late calls, enough little moments where she compared his shine to my silence. I did not ask if there had been more than flirtation. Not then. Not because I did not care. Because that question belonged to another file, and I had learned to open one file at a time. What did Brandon say? I asked. She hesitated. That I was carrying you. That I had outgrown this life. That a woman closing deals at my level needed a partner who looked the part. I looked at my hands, the faint scars across two knuckles, the old callus near my thumb. Looked the part. There it was, the cheapest religion in expensive rooms. Appearance over structure. Sparkle over steel. She stepped closer and said, I let him make me feel important. I nodded once. No comfort. No cruelty. Just acknowledgement. The next morning, Richard Hale sent the first review summary. Vanessa's firm had to remove her from sole lead status on the deal and assign a senior compliance partner to supervise communications. Claire's statement was included. 2 other associates confirmed the dinner incident. Brandon's texts, forwarded by Vanessa after pressure from her own counsel, showed he had encouraged her to embarrass me so I would stop showing up to events. That line sat on the page like a fingerprint. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just ugly in plain English. Richard asked whether I wanted to terminate the partnership. I read the question 3 times. I thought about doing it. I thought about letting the whole deal collapse under the weight of their arrogance. But then I thought about the warehouse workers, the construction crews, the routes, the vendors, the families tied to a project bigger than one marriage. A powerful man can burn a bridge. A disciplined man decides who still needs to cross it. I wrote back, continue review. Replace exposed leadership. Protect the project. Hold final approval. Then I sat in the quiet office and understood something that felt heavier than revenge. Vanessa had wanted the world to see me as useless. By the end of that day, the world had not only seen me, it had started waiting for my decision. The following morning arrived crisp and clear, sunlight cutting through the office windows and casting long, sharp lines across the conference table as Caleb Turner reviewed the updated compliance report, his hands steady over the pile of documents that now represented the firm's accountability and Vanessa's missteps. Vanessa entered quietly, not with the usual flourish or rehearsed confidence. Her cream blazer replaced by a softer gray jacket, shoulders slightly slumped from the weight of the night's realizations, and Caleb, seated at the head of the table, looked up calmly, his presence asserting authority without a word, as the room seemed to pause around them. Executives aware that the controlling owner of Turner Industrial Holdings had returned fully into the center of decision-making. And as Caleb outlined the procedural adjustments, detailing the reallocation of lead responsibilities, oversight of public communications, and insertion of senior compliance partners into the Meridian West project, Vanessa listened, noting the precision and restraint in every instruction, understanding for the first time the tangible consequences of dismissing structure in favor of appearance. And she felt a mixture of awe and accountability as each line of instruction reinforced that the $600 million deal was no longer simply a product of her ambition but required oversight, verification, and her adherence to proper governance. And as Caleb continued, highlighting areas where her leadership had exposed risk, Vanessa acknowledged quietly, almost imperceptibly, that her prior confidence had been based on assumption rather than understanding. The room's energy shifting as every associate and executive adjusted to the clear delineation of power, realizing that compliance and trust were no longer theoretical but enforced by someone who had patiently built influence beneath the surface. And when Caleb paused to allow questions, Vanessa spoke first, asking clarifying points about delegation and reporting lines, her voice measured, no longer a performance, but a genuine inquiry, showing a willingness to learn from errors rather than deflect them. And as she listened to Caleb's calm explanations, her perspective began to shift, recognizing that leadership requires more than strategy or charm. It demands consistency, transparency, and humility. And throughout the meeting, Caleb remained composed, guiding the discussion with deliberate care, ensuring that every point of review was addressed, every potential conflict mitigated, and every executive understood that the authority he exercised was built on years of planning and foresight, not reaction or emotion, leaving Vanessa to navigate the reality that her prior assumptions of dominance and influence had been replaced by structured governance and oversight. And by the conclusion of the session, she sat quietly, pensively, absorbing the lessons that discipline, preparation, and respect for procedural authority could instill. While Caleb calmly signed off on the final adjustments, the room realigned around him, and Vanessa realized that this was the type of power that commanded attention without theatrics, the steady, undeniable authority that comes from knowledge, patience, and silent preparation. And for the first time in years, she understood what it truly meant to be under someone's control in a professional, accountable, and non-personal way. The following day began quietly, the city streets below Charlotte still and gleaming from early morning dew. While Caleb Turner sat at his desk reviewing the amended compliance reports and final approval checklists, the sunlight reflecting softly off the polished surfaces, lending a weightless calm to the room that contrasted with the tension lingering from yesterday's revelations. Vanessa Turner entered, her gray jacket neatly pressed, eyes focused but cautious, her movements deliberate, showing she understood the subtle shifts in authority. And Caleb did not rise, but watched her, noting the difference between presence and performance, the difference between power assumed and power acknowledged, as he explained the new oversight measures, including dual verification for all external communications, mandatory partner briefings before announcements, and a schedule for staggered approvals designed to ensure accountability without chaos. Each point laid out clearly, precise, and unambiguous, leaving no room for misinterpretation or casual neglect, and Vanessa nodded subtly, her fingers tracing the edge of the folder in front of her, silently registering the difference between prior confidence built on impression and the structured authority now in play. The boardroom staff observed quietly, taking notes and absorbing the new procedural hierarchy, the atmosphere shifting as executives adjusted to the reinforced reality that Caleb's control over Turner Industrial Holdings and the Meridian West deal was both legal and comprehensive, and that any prior assumptions of casual influence or informal leverage no longer applied, while Vanessa, for her part, demonstrated a mixture of contrition and professional curiosity, asking clarifying questions about delegation chains, compliance checkpoints, and reporting expectations, signaling a willingness to learn and adapt rather than resist or deflect, and Caleb responded methodically, patient, ensuring that each inquiry was addressed thoroughly, reinforcing that diligence and preparation formed the foundation of influence, not theatrics or superficial charm. And as the morning progressed, Vanessa began to see the practical consequences of her earlier behavior, recognizing that her missteps had triggered corrective measures not out of malice, but from the necessity of protecting corporate integrity and project continuity, while Caleb maintained a calm, steady presence, guiding the discussion, signing documents, and confirming protocol adherence with deliberate care, ensuring that the workflow and governance now respected the chain of command and reflected his overarching authority. And by midday, as the team adjourned for a brief lunch, Vanessa sat quietly at her desk, reviewing notes, her demeanor subdued yet attentive, absorbing the lesson that influence comes from consistency, clarity, and respect for established structures, and that reputation, once fractured, requires measured action and careful navigation to repair, all while Caleb observed from his position, aware that the balance of power had been recalibrated, that accountability had been restored, and that Vanessa, despite prior ambitions, was now functioning within the boundaries set by deliberate oversight. Realizing that authority exercised with patience and preparation speaks louder than any argument, and the $600 million deal, intact and under governance, moved forward with clarity and precision, a testament to quiet discipline over impulsive confidence. By the end of the week, Turner Industrial Holdings had fully executed the necessary governance adjustments, ensuring the $600 million deal moved forward under strict oversight, and Vanessa Turner, now acclimated to the structured framework, approached Caleb with a quieter presence, her posture no longer the performance of prior arrogance, but a measured acknowledgement of accountability and professional respect. And as they reviewed the finalized communications plan, Caleb, emphasized that oversight was not punishment, but necessary stewardship to protect stakeholders and maintain corporate integrity, outlining step-by-step protocols, compliance checks, and the revised leadership delegation, all documented with meticulous care and confirmed by legal counsel, while Vanessa absorbed each detail. Noting the difference between assumed authority and real responsibility, the impact of decisions made without clarity, and the subtle weight of oversight, and as she glanced around the office, observing Claire and other associates working with renewed focus, the lesson became clear that influence requires both structure and humility, a truth Caleb had reinforced through patience and precise action. And later, as they concluded the review and prepared for public announcements, Vanessa paused at the door, meeting Caleb's steady gaze, and whispered a quiet acknowledgement of understanding, demonstrating her personal growth and awareness of the professional boundaries now firmly established. While Caleb responded with calm affirmation, the office air charged with an unusual combination of relief and respect, and as the day ended, the two stood side by side reviewing the final approval summaries, reflecting on the lessons learned about patience, preparation, and the enduring value of accountability. And as viewers witness this resolution, consider how power, responsibility, and human dynamics intersect in high-stakes environments, prompting reflection on personal integrity, decision-making, and professional conduct. And if you found yourself captivated by the strategic patience, the recalibration of authority, and the subtle human interactions throughout this story, think about how you would react in similar circumstances. And for more engaging, insightful narratives that explore the complexity of relationships, decision-making, and the nuanced world of family drama stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel and stay updated with every new story. Each crafted to immerse you in compelling family drama stories, challenge your perceptions, and reveal the layers of character and consequence, ultimately enhancing your understanding of family drama stories and the delicate balance of human interaction, leaving you eager to see how each character navigates choices, authority, and emotion in this unfolding saga of family drama stories.